I would tell someone who's kind of working through these things, struggling through these things, spirituality is like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It's all mix and match. Make it up as you go, cafeteria, whatever helps you. But Christianity is a historical claim. And so it's either true or it's false, but it's not something you can make up. It's not something you can add to your Buddhism or to your Islam or to, your spirituality.
You often hear people say, I'm spiritual, but not necessarily religious. The philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. I believe we are all, in our own way, searching for a deeper connection to that spiritual side in order to elevate our lives.
She needs almost no introduction. Oprah Winfrey, talk show host, producer, author, actress, and also one of the great proponents of being spiritual but not religious. And that clip is from an episode of her TV show Super Soul Sunday, which ran for 10 years until 2021, where she talked to her guests about spirituality. Way back in 2002, Christianity Today published an article titled The Church of O, naming Oprah as one of the most influential spiritual leaders in America. The Oprah effect has been described as a key factor in mainstreaming the New Age movement. Fast forward, and now we're reading newspaper headlines like, "Are we in the middle of a spiritual awakening?" and "Spiritual but not religious, inside America's rapidly growing faith group." A 2023 study from the Pew Research Center found that 22% of Americans would describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. That's 1 in 5 people. My guest today says this is not really a new phenomenon. The spiritual but not religious category actually has ancient origins. Everything does. And it's been Christianity's dancing partner, although maybe we should say sparring partner, down through the ages. Where does the spiritual but not religious concept come from? What does it say about us humans? And why do so many people see it as preferable to Christianity? I'm John Dickson, and this is Undeceptions. Every episode at Undeceptions, we explore some aspect of life, faith, history, science, culture, or ethics that's either much misunderstood or mostly forgotten. With the help of people who know what they're talking about, we're trying to undeceive ourselves and let the truth out. It is remarkable what you've done. So can you define spiritual but not religious in a way that works for the ancient, the medieval, and the modern descriptor?
Yeah, well, in brief, I chart the emergence of this strange fellow from the grave clothes of being a shaman to becoming a sage, a philosopher. And it's really remarkable that, a lot of historians say that around the 6th century BC, something big happened across continents, and religions became less ritualistic and focused on this life, getting the gods to do what you want now by giving them enough sacrifices and so forth, to thinking more metaphysically, philosophically about the afterlife and the soul.
That's Michael S. Horton, a well-known theology professor from Westminster Seminary in California. He's the author of a bunch of books, including an enormous multi-volume project that charts the intellectual history of this spiritual but not religious phenomenon. I'm interested in Volume 1, Shaman and Sage, the roots of spiritual but not religious in antiquity. According to Professor Horton, before the 6th century BC, the stories about creation and the cosmos were mostly about reinforcing boundaries. Know your place in the grand scheme of things. Harmonize yourself with the natural order. You can see it in the myths of the age. As Horton points out, the great Babylonian epic Enuma Elish, which was read out in public each year, has human beings created out of the blood of the losing god Kinju, and they're created for the simple purpose of serving the gods their food through temple offerings and so on. Public religion in this frame was about the gods, the priests, and the people, all following their assigned roles in the great hierarchy of the cosmos. But outside this scheme, there was the shaman, a kind of medicine man, a spiritual entrepreneur, and people would go to him, and mostly it was a him, outside the city walls, outside the bounds of the cosmic order, as it were, and through his mediation, folks would be able to commune with the divine directly. They could commune with the powers and even with their dead relatives. It was a kind of private spirituality, unconnected to civic religion, and it became increasingly popular around the world about 500 years before Christ.
You find the emergence of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, and late period Egypt, same developments there. Across this wide territory, you have figures who are emerging as they had been outsiders in the ritualistic religion before. Now they are philosophers and they're gaining adherents, and their philosophy is not the public religion. It's mysteries that they bring. And that's the beginning, I think, of a kind of and somewhat antagonistic relationship between the spiritual, people who are into spirituality, and the public religion, whatever that public religion happens to be.
So is that the simple distinction that my listeners should get their head around, that spiritual as opposed to public religion? So is spiritual just spirituality that's private, but it's still religion, but it's private?
Yeah.
Or is there something more philosophically different about spirituality and religion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you find in this spirituality, for example, the emergence of the doctrine of reincarnation, never been heard before in Greece, or in India for that matter, and yet it sweeps into the Western world, particularly through Empedocles and Pythagoras and Plato, and so you have all these ideas that were foreign, but they're now popping up. People are beginning to get a sense of the self, in the locative world of pre-6th century BC. You really weren't aware of yourself. Everything about you, your whole identity, was your relationship to others. So I am so-and-so's son, born in this family, belonging to this clan, which belongs to this city, which belongs to the king. And that begins to become undone as people are thinking about their own individual selves and where they're going to spend eternity, where their soul came from, and so forth. And so people are not as interested in doctrine and ritual as they are in philosophical interpretations of reality.
And it's a kind of self-actualization that they're aiming for, isn't it?
Absolutely. People are realizing I'm an individual. I have rights. I have agency here. I'm not just a part of something. I have my own life.
One of the big spiritual movements of this revolution was Orphism, which Michael Horton says has shaped modern spirituality more than we realize. Orphism was named for Orpheus, the mythical son of the god Apollo, and the muse Calliope, or Calliope in Greek, who was renowned for his music. He was kind of the rock and roll star spirit being. He could charm nature and even the gods with his lyre and voice and poetry. He even rescued his wife Eurydice, or Eurydice, if you want to be Greek, from the underworld. Almost. His music tamed the deathly powers right up until he broke the golden rule of Hades. He looked back and he lost her forever. His myth became associated with creativity, independence, spiritual power, immortality, and a vast spiritual but not religious literature. So I can give listeners some concrete examples of this spirituality. I want to just talk about a bunch of figures that you mention in the book. And if you can, give this the tiniest précis so I can move on to the next one. And the obvious one is Orphic spirituality, going back to the legendary figure Orpheus.
Yeah.
What's he on about?
I know so as the legend goes, Dionysus and his half-brother Apollo governed the Delphi, the Oracle of Delphi, at different times. So when Apollo, the rational god, the god of reason and stability and form, when he went off to summer in the north, Dionysus would awaken from his tomb and run around pricking his votaries with a stick called a thyrsus stick. At the end, there would be a needle. Whether there actually was one or not, whether his followers actually used them, there's some evidence that they did, a Dionysian cult. But that's the myth, and they are at odds with each other. One's rational, one's the party god. It's like they have a bad family thing and daddy issues. Zeus is not that big on Dionysus. He favors Apollo. So anyway, they get into these clashes. Orpheus is someone who comes along, a legendary figure, and combines them. He tries to reconcile Apollo and Dionysus and gets killed in the midst of it. So really, Orpheus comes to stand for this philosophical reconciliation of reason and mysticism. And when Plato, for example, it's significant that Plato says, really, when you become philosophical, you become Dionysian. In fact, he says, philosophers are the true thyrsus bearers. They're the ones pricking people with madness, divine madness, the madness of philosophy. And so this is the sort of thing that I think is deep in the Western psyche, that we have these two brothers in us, Dionysus and Apollo, at war, reason and mysticism, and they are often there together. The most rationalistic.
Orpheus represents that, yes?
Orpheus represents that. Yeah. The most rationalistic thinkers in Western history are often.
So you would say Plato is like the example of this. So yep. we often think of Plato as all head, but he's not. He's really a mystic, isn't he?
Oh, he really is. In fact, he will say, he'll refer to the Orphic mysteries as scripture, practically. He'll say, as we know in the sacred story, and that will be an Orphic text. So he's very, very dependent on this kind of mysticism. And you find it, reason only takes you so far for Plato. And then you have to have a mystical experience, a flash, a shock, where you just know that you know intuitively. You don't have any external authority telling you. You're just absolutely intuitively convinced of the truth.
And it is ultimately about a kind of merger with the one, with the good.
Right.
That's the goal. So in the end, the goal isn't just to be thinking, it's to be thinking into the one.
Yeah, to be united to the one, because we all fell into diversity through having individual bodies. And the goal is to get out of our diversity, out of our bodies, and return to the great flame, the great origin, the one. And that really is the goal of philosophy in the golden age of Greece.
From these Orphic mysteries develops the idea that humans have a dual nature, a physical body and a divine spark or soul. This isn't the only source of the idea, but it is one deep well in Greco-Roman thought. According to one version of the myth, the Titans, they're the older, violent generation of gods, devoured the infant Dionysus, one of the younger so-called Olympian gods associated with wine, ecstasy, and rebirth. Father Zeus was not very happy and so destroyed the Titans. And out of their ashes arose, you guessed it, humanity. Humans therefore inherited a titanic nature that's prone to corruption and irrationality and violence, and also a divine element derived from Dionysus. Don't worry about him though, because Dionysus got better after being eaten by the Titans. You can forget the details, you probably will, but the point is, it's from reflection on myths like these that people came to see human beings as partly earthly and bodily and partly spiritual and oriented toward the divine. We have the Titan element and the divine element in one. It was then a short step to the idea that a divine soul is trapped inside my physical body. Plato, writing in the 4th century BC, famously described the body as a prison for the soul. So when people speak of the Platonic outlook, they generally mean this sharp distinction between the earthly and the divine, the body and the spirit. The goal is to see the soul liberated from the lower world and restored to the higher reality, the one, from which it ultimately came. Plato and his successors helped shift attention away from traditional civic religion and toward a more individualistic spirituality, longing for that one. And there's a Christian version of it that I want to ask you about after I ask you about Hermes and the whole Hermetic tradition. So we'll get to the Christian version of this, but tell me about Hermes and the whole Hermetic tradition.
Sure. Oh, Hermes Trismegistus. Trismegistus, just Latin for thrice great. Hermes was thought in Greece to be the god who communicated between the living and the dead. He was the one who took souls to Hades, and he's the one who communicated messages from the gods to mortals. Well, he becomes fused in Alexandria after the time of Alexander. Now Egypt is you have a Greco-Egyptian culture, and Hermes gets fused with the Egyptian god Thoth, who is the scribe, who takes down everybody's good and bad and determines who goes to heaven or hell. They become fused, and that figure is thrice great Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus, who is considered He never lived, of course, but they thought he did. They thought he was the father of technology, of art and culture, of science, of religion and law, and of all the mysteries. And so you have, for example, he's called the first theologian. And, Augustine in The City of God rejects that claim. He's not a theologian, he's a philosopher. But it's interesting. He becomes, in the imagination, a sort of representative figure for a literature, a particular literature that emerges in the 1st and 2nd century in Alexandria. And it is magic, it is mysticism, it's very heavily Platonic and Stoic in nature, with some Egyptian magic thrown in. And it's really about spiritual technology. It's about how to escape the bonds of this world and all the evil forces that try to keep us from ascending out of this realm. That really becomes a tradition with a lot of manuscripts, a lot of writings. Basically, it becomes Velcro that everything sticks to for these kinds of philosophers talking about how do we return to the one.
You might be able to identify a kind of family resemblance between Hermetic ideas and modern New Age practices like manifesting. Master your thoughts and you can alter your physical reality. The background idea in both Hermeticism and New Ageism is that everything is ultimately one universal mind. So trained human thinking, thinking that taps into the one, can change our surroundings. Often today's manifesting is more about material possessions, getting a better job, more money, physical health or whatever, whereas the ancient concept was more spiritual. But you can see the same concept at play. Orphism and Hermeticism are two of the big influences on the spiritual but not religious outlook. After the break, we're going to look at a third influence that has a Christian tinge. It's called Gnosticism. This episode of Undeceptions is brought to you by the New Living Translation from Tyndale House. Tyndale first published its New Living Translation of the Bible, the NLT for short, back in 1996. They employed a team of over 100 Bible scholars who worked with the earliest Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts to bring the NLT to life. The result is a razor-accurate, super readable English translation that this year celebrates its 30th anniversary. And honestly, I recommend this translation if you're not even sure about the Christian faith. I think you'll find it really meaningful. With the NLT, Tyndale House is continuing the legacy of its namesake, William Tyndale. In the 16th century, he produced the first direct English translation of the Bible from the original Greek and Hebrew. And honestly, this is a translation I recommend, especially if you're not sure what to make of the Christian faith. It's one that is accurate, but it really opens what it means for us today. Try it for yourself. Visit Tyndale.com and use the code POD30, all caps, at checkout for 30% off any NLT Bible. That's Tyndale.com, code POD number 30. The Democratic Republic of Congo is currently in the midst of an escalating Ebola outbreak. With a death rate between 30 and 50%, it's a dangerous moment for a population already suffering from ongoing civil war. Anglican Aid is on the ground near the epicenter of the outbreak, working with churches and a network of health clinics to prevent the spread of this disease. They need your help to continue, so please consider donating to its emergency relief fund. Head to anglicanaid.org.au/undeceptions. That's anglicanaid.org.au/undeceptions. Every donation makes a difference.
Do you want to know what it is. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
That's the famous blue pill, red pill scene from the philosophically charged sci-fi film The Matrix. This is where Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, promises to show Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, the truth of the Matrix, a simulated world designed to imprison humanity. Film critics frequently point out the similarities between the Matrix and Gnostic theology. The term Gnostic comes from the Greek word knowledge, gnosis. Gnosticism is a bit of a catch-all term for a diverse collection of religious and philosophical ideas that emerged in the late 1st century, early 2nd century. And for reasons that aren't entirely clear to us, somehow latched itself onto Christianity. People with a basic Orphic or Hermetic outlook, perhaps especially down in Egypt, began to see the recently famous Jesus as the ultimate bridge between this grubby physical world and the highest spiritual realm. In the 2nd and 3rd century Gnostic Gospels, the so-called Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Philip, Gospel of Judas, and so on, Jesus didn't come from the God of the Old Testament. That God was a lower being associated with grubby created earth. No, Jesus came from the eternal light, far above this physical prison. Now, by listening to and obeying the secret knowledge that Jesus whispered to Thomas or Philip or whoever while the other disciples weren't listening, the Gnostic believer was able one day to escape this world and become one with the eternal spirit world from which Jesus had come. Gnostics would take the red pill.
Gnosticism is like Platonism on steroids. In fact, Plotinus, probably the greatest interpreter of Plato, an heir of Plato, said, perhaps the Gnostics got their hatred of the body from Plato. So he recognized that there was a connection, but he said that they took it to ridiculous lengths. The Gnostics separated from the so-called Great Church, in other words, the Orthodox, pulling together a lot of the mysticism and mythology of this Greco-Egyptian religion. And their main thing was, in contradiction to Christianity, was that this world, material world, is the creation of an evil god called Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Jews. And salvation, the whole goal of salvation is to rise up out of being a material-focused person to being a Gnostic, someone who knows immediately and intuitively and whose mind is one with the universal mind. And so they didn't believe that Jesus really was incarnate. He only appeared to have a human body. They didn't believe that, therefore, that we will be raised bodily, because Jesus wasn't raised bodily. He only appeared to die. And which, of course, Islam also teaches in its own way. So there was absolutely no point at which Gnostics and Orthodox Christians, ordinary churches, could have any fellowship. the doctrines were diametrically opposed. And the Gnostics,
Yet it's amazing, isn't it, that in the Gnostic texts that survive, they're putting all this stuff that you've been describing on the lips of Jesus.
yes,
It's that Jesus who told all that stuff about, don't worry about that Jewish God, the horrible creator. We need to escape and go away. It is a remarkable fusion.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it says something about the innovative power of Christians or the attractive nature of Jesus to pagans. Is Gnosticism Christian that's gone astray, or is it really just paganism on the lips of Jesus? What would you say to that?
That's a great question, John. I think, without overstating things, throughout this whole project leading up to now concluding with our own day, I think that what we keep getting is a Gnostic revival. We keep getting this revival of, you have Christian terminology, appeals to Jesus, and so forth, but it's clearly focused on inner therapy, self-help, getting out of the body, finding ways of turning theology into philosophy or mysticism, and it is really, wherever you see it, it is a violent opposition to the God of creation, the God who created the world, who has certain laws that he put in place, who judges, who redeems, and does so through physical means. This whole, body of Christianity, which came out of the faith of Israel, very earthy faith. They'll say, for example, the ancient Gnostics said, we don't need bloody sacrifices. All those bloody, offering of bulls and calves in the Old Testament. Jesus didn't really offer his blood as a sacrifice for us. Well, you hear people talking like that today. We don't need all this blood and flesh stuff. Let's just raise our minds to contemplate the Easter experience or new life, or, how to turn it into something new agey.
It's totally recognizable today. I mean, you and I could name names, but let's not. Can I ask you sympathetically to describe the essential good news of this outlook? If you had to, describe what they thought was good news about this outlook, and then I want to turn to Christianity's critique.
Yeah. How do you get out? I mean, that's really the question. Everyone's looking for salvation in 2nd century Alexandria. The Hermeticists, the Gnostics, and the Christians are all giving different ways of salvation. So philosophy initially really was a way of salvation. Plato even called it a way of life, not a way of doctrine, but a way of life. And I think that you have, for example, this tremendous fear that demons are all around us. They're slithering as snakes under our doors. There are all these cries in the Gnostic literature about, these archons, these evil beings that are spoiling our happiness and giving us diseases and so forth. How can our soul, the Gnostic is addressing this question, how can our soul rise from our body and get past, it's like a video game, get past all of these evil archons, which are basically planets, to break through the crystalline sphere in order to get out and be safe in heaven? That's what they're promising. How to get out, salvation from this world. And Christianity was preaching, how has God saved this world?
Yes. So the premise of this spirituality that we're talking about is a fundamental pessimism about what is, about the life we find ourselves in.
Right.
And would you say that Christianity, from its Jewish heritage, has a fundamental positivity about the world and the body and so on? Is that a simple way of thinking about it?
Absolutely. I think Christianity is so unique in world religions because, for a lot of reasons, but especially because when it comes to its view of nature, it says that the reason for sin is moral, not ontological. It's not because we're material bodies. It's not because we live in a material world. It's because we're sinners. And that's actually good news, because you can redeem a sinner, but you can't really redeem a human being who is inherently, essentially garbage, not worth saving, which is what the Gnostics thought. We've got to get out of here, like a lot of transhumanists today. Our bodies aren't worth saving. But Christians said, oh, yes, no, absolutely. This world and our bodies in it are integral to who we are, and God created them. God will not destroy anything that he made that is good. He's going to destroy sin. He's going to destroy evil and injustice. He's going to judge the world in righteousness. And then he's going to raise the dead to life everlasting. And how do we know this? Because he's raised his son from the dead, and who was like us in every way except for sin. Two completely different ways of looking at the world. One, that you look at it dualistically. It's because of matter versus mind or spirit, or sin versus grace.
One of my favorite prayers from the Anglican prayer book is the Good Friday prayer, which has a line that says, "Thou hatest nothing that thou hast made."
Yeah, I love that. I love that prayer. And it's from the Psalms. So, I mean, that's right. I mean, we have to really think about that. We have this in our own circles, Christian circles today, this idea of the late great planet Earth. It's going to all be destroyed, and that kind of apocalyptic, catastrophic outlook really has tinges of the Gnostic belief that this world will just cease to exist.
Can I ask you, though, to describe for us, in this context, I mean, you described the good news from the perspective of the spiritualists, but what would be the best Christian response to it? You seem to like Irenaeus. That's good, because Irenaeus hated this stuff, didn't he?
Yeah.
But how do you think what's the best critique of it? Let's just start in the ancient world. Who deals with it best from a Christian perspective?
Sure. Well, and I think Augustine deals with it really well in The City of God. He goes right after Hermeticism and Gnosticism. But Irenaeus in the 2nd century, he was right on top of it. And if you read his Against Heresies, I'm sure you have. If you read it from cover to cover, it's almost basically how to read the Bible.
Yep. I make my students read it. Let me give you a little taste of one of Irenaeus's lovely arguments. He lays out the Gnostic use of words and names plucked from Christian scripture, but disconnected from the actual theme or story of scripture. So grace is one deity, according to the Gnostics. Father is another one. Christ, another. Jesus is yet another. Logos, or word, is another being. And all of them are different from the highest being toward which our souls long. Irenaeus first compares this strategy of the Gnostics to someone taking a mosaic of a king made out of jewels and rearranging it into the image of a fox. The bits are jewels, but the portrait is junk. Then Irenaeus offers another brilliant analogy of the same thing, and this is where I'm going to get the quote going. Imagine someone taking lines from the epic poems of Homer, from the Iliad and the Odyssey, and turning them into a random nonsensical nursery rhyme. Here's Irenaeus from Against Heresies.
After having entirely fabricated their own system, they gather together sayings and names from scattered places and transfer them, as we have already said, from their natural meaning to an unnatural one. They act like those who would take verses from Homer and arrange them according to a theme of their own, so that the inexperienced think Homer composed them that way. For example, there was sent Hercules, the powerful hero, by Eurystheus, the son of Sthenelus, that from Erebus he might fetch the dog of dark Hades. Therefore Hermes together with blue-eyed Athena did send him. One who is well versed in Homer will recognize the verses, but he will not recognize the concocted theme, since he knows that some were spoken of Ulysses, others of Hercules himself, others of Priam, and so on. If he puts each one back into its own context, he will make the concoction disappear. In the same way, anyone who holds on to the unchangeable rule of truth received in baptism will recognize the names, sayings, and parables of the Gnostics, but they will not recognize this blasphemous theme of theirs. For even if he recognizes the jewels of the mosaic, he will not accept the fox for the image of the king. Irenaeus Against Heresies, Book 1, Part 8.
I love Irenaeus.
It's a great biblical theology.
Yeah.
And in it, he sharply contrasts the biblical story with the Gnostic stories. And we have to say in plural because it was a vociferous kind of movement every time, because it was based on a cult leader. And once that cult leader died, it split off into 3 or 4 different branches and so forth. But Irenaeus explains each of those groups and their various views. And then he says, here's what they have in common, and here's what Christianity teaches in sharp contrast. So I think what I love about Irenaeus, John, is, well, one of the things is that he talks about deification or glorification, not as something that happens to the soul when it leaves the body, but as something that happens at the resurrection of the body, when we will be like God as much as it is possible for a creature to be, but will be embodied. But so is God the Son. So we will be like the Father in terms of our conformity to righteousness and holiness and goodness, but we will also be like the Son as he is now in his glorified state. And Irenaeus, one of his lines that I love is, the glory of God is a human fully alive. Isn't that marvelous?
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't get a less hermetic, Orphic statement.
Right.
Selah is a Hebrew word often associated with an intentional pause. And that's how Selah, the travel company, run their tours. They're for people who want to go deeper and learn about the incredible history of Christianity around the world. Walk in the footsteps of amazing medieval figures like the Venerable Bede across the landscapes of Scotland and Northern England. Man, I'd like to do that one. Or along the way with the Apostle Paul through Turkey, Greece, Malta and Rome. I want to do that one as well. Or if you haven't had enough of me, I'll be taking a group of my besties around the Holy Land, the state of Israel and Palestine, later this year for 2 weeks, visiting the key sites of Jesus' life as we explore the origins of Christianity. But getting quick, these tours have limited numbers, so we can all get to know each other better. Hope to see you. Book your tour now at selah.au. That's SELAH.au. See you there.
We live in uncertainty. We know that at any time disaster might strike. We cannot foresee the future. It is very uncomfortable to live under such conditions. People make up ways of controlling the future. They dream about fairy godmothers who give them gifts. They go and ask questions of fortune tellers of all kinds to give them a hint as to what may be in store for them and how they may best persuade fate to deal kindly with them, or if they're religious, they'll pray to God. Something like that. It gives them a feeling of security.
That's the legendary 20th century science fiction author and biochemist Isaac Asimov. I don't know how these references get snuck into my scripts. But apparently Asimov wrote a ton of books, including the Foundation trilogy and I, Robot. There, he's talking about religion as superstition, widely held, but ultimately just a set of irrational beliefs in supernatural influences on our lives. Some people have to wear their favourite pair of undies for an important soccer match. Not revealing too much, am I? Others say, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name," and so on. Well, that's certainly a view. Can I ask you a question that might be sitting in the minds of listeners who are maybe a little bit skeptical about Christianity or just don't know what to make of the Christian faith? They might think, so you've sort of described superstition, this spirituality, the magical thinking, the sort of ultimately leaving the body, the archons, etc. Why isn't Christianity just a more developed superstition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's interesting that that a lot of the magic of the Middle Ages, for example, laid the groundwork for the sort of technological orientation of early modern science. But you couldn't get out of that superstitious worldview until Christianity critiqued it. And so the early pioneers of the scientific revolution, I cover in the second volume, they are Orthodox Christians for the most part. Robert Boyle, for example, wrote a great treatise, attacking this idea of nature itself being divine. No, divinity belongs only to the triune God. There's God and there's everything else. And that opened the door for science to study nature as nature.
Another book. It's a book from God. It's
right.
not God.
Exactly. It doesn't emanate from God. It's spoken by God from nothing. And that really opened the door. Creation ex nihilo really opened the door as it did in the ancient world. Christianity fundamentally is focused on, again, salvation of the world, not salvation from the world. It's focused on the resurrection of Jesus Christ after he was really dead for 3 days. He really rose on the third day as the beginning of the new creation. And that triggered a new era of human history. It's now the age of salvation. And I think that I would tell someone who's kind of working through these things, struggling through these things, spirituality is like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It's all mix and match. Make it up as you go, cafeteria, whatever helps you. But Christianity is a historical claim. And so it's either true or it's false, but it's not something you can make up. It's not something you can add to your Buddhism or to your Islam or to your spirituality. It's not something you can tack on, you can add. It is a a completely historical claim that either is true or not. And if it's true, it is the beginning of the new creation. Jesus is risen, and we are caught up in that mystery, and one day we'll be raised glorious like him.
Other listeners might be thinking your mention of science might remind them that science disenchanted the world, left us without mystery and transcendence, and they themselves are a bit disillusioned by that. So is Christianity responsible for taking the magic out of our world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a key question, that I'm dealing with here in this project. Well, first of all, disenchantment comes from Max Weber, the sociologist, the turn of the 20th century. Max Weber, but he didn't coin it. He got it from Schelling and other romantic writers who said basically Christianity disenchanted the world. So the way this story goes, and Max Weber tells it like this, the Hebrew prophets, in making God the only God, there is no other, chased the other gods out of the world and chased superstition and magic out of the world. Everything was idolatry. And then the Christians just followed in that train, and the Protestant Reformation took it to a new level. And that's why we live in a disenchanted world. That's basically Charles Taylor's take in a secular age. Mm-hmm. Well, disenchantment, the word, Max Weber uses it the way the Romantics did. He gives that same genealogy from the Hebrew prophets to the Christians to the Reformation, this disenchanting of the world. If we want to go back to enchantment, for Weber and company, that means going back to the superstitions and myths and magic of the pre-Christian world. So we don't want that. But here's something real. The Word became flesh. I don't know how more magical you get than that, but it's not a natural kind of magic. It is God actually entering into our world and caring for us and suffering with us, and then rising again on the third day, bearing our sins. And this is, again, this is not something that is vague or abstract. It's historical, and it brings us into it rather than having us as the stars of the show creating it. I think that's, at the end of the day, whatever criticisms can be made of how Christians have talked about this story sometimes, the story itself is amazing.
Yeah, because it means the material world we're in isn't magic in the sense of being capricious and scary, and you need to placate it and watch out for it.
Right.
It's actually more like all the sentiment of a gift of love from a lover is in this gift.
Yeah, a great example of that, I think, is the contrast between the, and I know you've done work on this, the myths of Israel's neighbors, the Gilgamesh epic, and Enuma Elish. You get from all of these religions outside of Israel, the world being created out of violence. The gods are there's this war in heaven. There's this war between the gods, and out of it comes human beings who are part divine and part garbage, really. And they're there to just do the work of the gods, because the gods are tired of making bricks and building things on earth. They basically want slaves. And then you turn to Genesis, and what you have there in Genesis is not only the king But everyone, male and female, is made in his image as royalty. And he created just because he wanted to. He created out of love, not out of violence. So this world is founded in love, not in some kind of primordial sci-fi thriller, but out of just for the sheer heck of it. God so loved the world, he created it.
Let's press pause. I've got a 5-minute Jesus for you. When asked what is the single greatest obligation of the human being, Jesus said there are 2. Love God with all your heart, soul and mind, and love your neighbour as yourself. Christianity is all the things. Christianity is not really a civic religion. With apologies to the Christian nationalists, no one who knows what they're talking about imagines the founding documents and founding centuries of Christianity ever envisaged that the way of Jesus would be a government program. In this way, Christianity is different from both Old Testament Judaism and from the Roman state religions, where religion was fused with government, where external rituals, whether Sabbath keeping or animal sacrifice, were civically mandated and policed for the public. For Jesus, loving God with all your heart referred to things like praying to God, listening to his word, embodying his virtues, not performing state-sanctioned observances. This is why Christianity has something in common with the spiritual but not religious vibe of the ancient and modern worlds. You can, as an individual, know God in a personal relationship of love. You can know God's love for you, especially in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and you can respond in love. On the other hand, unlike Orphism, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and contemporary New Age spirituality, Christianity is not about private, soulish liberation only. This spirituality is meant to send you back into the world to build relationships with others. Love your neighbour. Christianity can, I agree, sometimes sound like a therapeutic spirituality, just as it can sometimes sound like a civic religion. But it isn't meant to be. What it's meant to be is a worldview that inspires love for God, and that love overflows in love for others. It is spirituality with community. But here's the other paradox or tension, the other way Christianity is all the things. It is at once supernatural and rational. It's about a God of love, yes, but you're meant to love this God with all your mind. And you can make your way into this faith from either direction. Loads of people come to Christianity after having spiritual longings or experiences. We did a whole episode on that topic with the New York Times columnist Ross Douthat. Check out that episode. I can't even remember what it's called, let alone its number. But Al, do you have that for me?
Yeah, Why Believe, episode 157.
You rock. But it is equally true that people come to faith through rational inquiry, through pondering the historical evidence for Jesus or the maths of the universe. Unlike other religious figures, we can know loads about the life of Jesus from the secular historical method. You can't prove it, but it's pretty clear we do have the kind of evidence you'd expect if Jesus did live, teach, heal, die, and even rise, and loads more evidence pointing in that direction than you could expect if it were all made up. And then there's the maths, as I say, from the tiniest particle to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. There is some spookily elegant order built into the fabric of things. This doesn't prove God, but it does help a lot of people think that behind the universal order is a mind, not magic. Superstition is ultimately a magical view of fundamental reality. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, atheism can sound like it rests ultimately on magic. I don't mean to be unfair, but I have had atheists say to me that the logic of a first cause behind the universe is strong. They admit that there can't be an infinite chain of cause and effect, and that an uncaused cause that wills the first effect is an elegant, logical solution. But then they insist that the rules of logic don't apply to the origin of the universe. The universe is rational all the way back to the first effect, they say, but the cause of that first effect need not be rational, because it's by definition outside of this rational cosmos. The universe just is. No further explanation is required. To me, that's a little bit of a cop-out, and it also sounds a little bit like believing in magic. Plenty of us, though, find ourselves more compelled by the idea that it is rationality all the way down and all the way up to the first cause himself. What's my point? I think it says something about Christianity that people can come to this worldview through either or both transcendent spiritual experience and intellectual inquiry. What's more, Christianity tends to make the spiritually inclined a little more disciplined in their thinking. The rigors of scripture and theology kind of demand it. And here's the thing, it makes the nerdy intellectual who embraces Christianity a little more open to transcendence. As Soren Kierkegaard loved to point out, Christianity isn't sub-rational, but it sure is supra-rational, above rationality. Our rationality doesn't fill the limits of who God is. We did a very moving episode on Kierkegaard called Blind Faith, episode 103. And there you'll see that the great Danish philosopher insisted that rationality can bring you to the shores of the ocean of God. But it's only when you dive in that you actually know God. You can press play now. There are so many things, Mike, we could explore. I mean, because your book is massive. It's 500 pages and something. But I have a final question, because I'm thinking of the listener who is wary of institutional religion like Christianity, drawn to the spiritualities on offer today. What encouragement can you offer them about the Christian faith?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, I understand. But I also think that institutional religion is like institutional anything else. Institutions have all sorts of flaws because they are historical bearers of a tradition of sinners. I mean, and that's true in the church too. So we have to take the good and bad of it. When Jesus says that we are his branches, he's the vine, we're the branches. When Paul says that Christ is the head of the church, he's not just talking about the invisible church, he's talking about the visible church, the institution. And so I think that if Christ, the head, doesn't mind being attached to this problematic body, then we have to as well. To be united to Christ is to be united to his body. And so I would say, don't think in terms of institutional religion as an abstract thing. Go to a church. Go to a church that preaches Christ and him crucified and risen. Go to a church that wants to understand this story better, where there are people who welcome you and want to come alongside you and want to learn with you and grow with you. Go to church for a while. Just sit there. You don't even have to participate. just sit there and kind of, take it in. That's what I would say. Come and see. Or come and hear, even better.
Michael Horton, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it so much.
Undeceptions is hosted by me, John Dickson, produced by Kaley Payne, and C-Fee references by Mark Hadley. Alasdair Belling is writer and researcher. Siobhan McGuiness, our online librarian. Lyndie Leviston remains my wonderful assistant. Santino Dimarco is chief finance and operations consultant. Peter Kazushko is our North American representative. Our voice actors today were Dakota Love and Yannick Laurie. Undeceptions is the flagship podcast of undeceptions.com, letting the truth out. Undeceptions podcast.